If you know somebody who is grieving right now, or possibly you yourself are going through a grieving process, maybe you've lost somebody close to you, maybe you've lost a family member, maybe someone extremely close to you. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience the last 2 years going through probably the most difficult point in my life and how routines actually played a part in it. So just over 2 years ago, I lost my mom to COVID-19. So it was a very, very intense experience for everybody in the whole world. And it was, again, as I mentioned, probably the hardest thing that I had to ever go through in my life, and very well may be one of, if not the hardest thing I ever will go through in my life. I'm not going to talk to you about all the specifics around around my mom's passing. What I am going to talk to you about is my grieving process. Now, number one, everybody's grieving process is different. So the way I handled it may be very different than the way you handle something, in your life, and, compared to somebody else, may be very, very different. But immediately, as soon as she began to get sick and then was hospitalized, I still was working a full-time job at that point. And in my mind, I was playing the denial card and well, she's going to be fine. I mean, she'll get out of it. They'll treat it'll be fine. And I kept kind of continuing. I mean, I had to still go to work, and I had to, and I decided to still do somewhat of my morning routines and after work routines and PM routines and different things like that. And, when it came pretty much down to, 7 weeks later on a ventilator, we knew pretty much what was going to happen. Things started to crumble. And then for a few months after that, there was no routines. There was no routine aspect of my life. It was, 2 weeks of compassion leave for work. And then even going back to work, I mean, if you've gone through a loss like this yourself, that you're going through the motions. The problem was at that point I was in sales, so my mind wasn't anywhere in the game, and you have to be in the game if you're going to actually sell something. About 6 months later, I got let go because I wasn't selling anything. Again, another just a very small little roadblock to the point where, I mean, that felt like nothing. I mean, who cares about a job? Either way, what happened was, as I mentioned, everything kind of fell apart. First couple of months after my mom passed, there was no routines. There was no waking up early to go to the gym, and there was no journaling, and whatever happened to me that day was what happened to me that day. The reason I tell you this is because I believe that kind of should be how it is, how it should be for somebody who is going through a grieving process and a loss of life. It is very uncertain. Your whole life has zero certainty because the thing that you've had the certainty in your life, that person is now gone. Everything has crumbled of anything knowing what is going to happen next. Now again, you may be someone who continues to go through the motions and does not stop, and that works for you, and that totally works for you. Like I said, everything goes through everybody goes through grieving differently. But when like I said, the reason I'm telling you this is that my opinion is that it may be best to kind of drop everything and let every day unfold to you. If you want to sit and watch movies all day for a couple of weeks, which is literally what I did, then perfect. If you want to go for a run one day and not the other, that's fine. It's totally what is you're feeling in the moment. But interestingly enough, like I said, probably about 2 months after my mom passed, my morning routines started to come back. And the reason why they came back was because I was in therapy. I was in a kind of a specific COVID-19 related therapy, but they can deal with grief, they can deal with whatever it may be. But it was short. It was 5 sessions, and it was very good. It was kind of what I needed. I probably could have used more, and I probably could still use more. But what this therapist suggested to me, which was fantastic, and I love that he was very results and process focused, was he was starting to list out all these things that I may want to think about doing, these personal development type things. And I said to him, I said, that's interesting, because you're listing out all the things that I used to do every single morning. And we laughed because, this is oftentimes with his other patients, this is fairly new. But to me, I'm like, yeah, it's literally, you just listed out half of my morning routine. So he said, okay, well, then all I would suggest you do is start to make very, very small incremental progress to bring those things back. So I started out bringing back my workouts. That was the only thing I did, but I started to do it in the mornings. Sometimes I would fall off, sometimes I wouldn't, but that was kind of my focus. It was the easiest thing I knew, and it was the thing that resulted in the best physical, emotional, and mental well-being after the fact. But what was so key was the consistency of the workout, knowing that I could choose to work out the next day, and I know for a fact that all my equipment's going to be right downstairs. I can walk down the stairs and work out if I wanted to. And knowing that possibility of consistency was there for me was very empowering. I truly look forward to it. I look forward to the process of working out, and again, how I would feel afterwards. And slowly but surely over time, I started to, put a couple other things back in place, and it was very organic. It was very natural, and it kind of just happened on its own. And another thing that helped bring back some of these elements of my routines that, again, made me feel better, that's why I wanted to do them, was a very odd spark of creativity. There's been a lot of studies that have showed that actually going through grieving process can spark creativity in people. And what's interesting enough is the ritual design planner was completely created about 4 to 6 months, that process around that, after my mom's passing. Because I sat down and once I started to have this space available in my life, mental space, just to kind of be outside of my normal day-to-day responsibilities, I just started thinking about the business every once in a while, and I realized, oh, wait a minute, the biggest thing, the best way I can teach ritual design is not through an online program first. It's actually through a physical planner, and a physical item that's easy to first of all, it's cheap to purchase, it's easy to jump into, it's easy to use. So like I said, interestingly enough, that process of developing the planner really aided in bringing back my PM routines, because that's when I would be working on it at night, and my morning routines as well, and of course my full ritual design. The last thing that I was told by my therapist that had a lot to do with not only the grieving process but building some of these routines back in was to go easy on myself. This was a very extremely delicate time, and if I was too hard on myself, it would not help me move forward in the right direction of wanting to have some type of semblance of normalcy again. So whether or not you decide to never ever partake in a routine ever again after you lose somebody, or maybe this grieving process for you sparks something and you are now obsessed with ritual design and building routines throughout your life, whatever it may be, again, the biggest thing to remember is to go easy on yourself. And the biggest thing that I have learned throughout this process is that you never get over it. I was actually told by an fellow employee, to move on. Like, because I wasn't making sales. You got to move on. It's over, And I to this day, I can't wrap my head around that thinking. And I'm sure for the most of you listening to this and watching this episode is like, clearly you're never going to move on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you are going to wake up the next morning. So when you wake up, you get to choose how you live that day, and the day after, and the day after. Now, again, in the beginning, you have to go easy on yourself. But over time, you'll develop a way to move through life with this grief. And interestingly enough, when preparing for this episode today, I found a TED Talk by Nora McLerney that literally resonated with exactly how I was feeling 2 years ago. And I think this is definitely a resource that you should check out, and I'll leave a link right up here. You can take a look at that.